All right, we're back. And that was a little bit longer break than I thought, but we're making record time, so a little bit long of a break. That's okay. We deserve it, right? Okay, so we were wrapping up the capital improvement fund summary, and there was, during the break, a reminder that there was a request that didn't make it into the budget. And Roger, if you want to come up here and talk about it a little bit. It was a $50,000 item for, I'll let Roger describe it. Roger Foote is the coordinator of the Upper Big Sioux River Watershed Project.
Thank you and good evening. Are we on? Thank you and good evening. There it's on. Yes, I'm Roger Foote with the Upper Big Sioux River Watershed Project. I know we didn't want to get into the weeds tonight, but I thought this was important enough to speak up a little bit. Last year with the long-term CIP, you approved a $50,000 project for the phosphorus removal facility, an engineering study to analyze the facility that we have to really make sure if my proposal of using algae to remove nutrients is viable, if the structure is adequate for that, and what that cost will actually be. We moved it to 2020 last year. It didn't make the book this year I probably messed up the paperwork or something. I would really like you guys to reinstate that for 2020. The reason for that is that if the cost comes in, if you guys believe that the project is feasible after the report, if the cost comes in above what we're projecting, that'll give me more additional time to fundraise for that. And also it will give us an amount of closure if the project isn't feasible. Well, then we can make plans to utilize that property for something else. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I will have to say, I think the confusion arose from my conversation that I thought the timing was wrong on it because we're not planning to do the project until 2023, and it's cutting edge science, this using or extracting algae or using algae to extract nutrients from the water. And I was just thinking we should do that a year before we bid it out and build it so that we're getting the absolute most up-to-date data. But I hadn't talked to Roger about that, and I guess there is some benefit to having extra years to do the fundraising, and when we design it, the science will just be better. It won't be worse. And so, you know, it does give us more time to either move forward with the project or go a different direction, like you said. Glenn?
Roger, for the benefit of, I guess, all of us, especially the new members in the council, can you fill us in just briefly what this project is all about?
Well, no. Yes, the watershed project, or the municipal utilities put the old water treatment plant up as surplus property a number of years ago. We transferred that to our department. We ran a 3-year experiment with funding from the DNR and EPA on using algae to remove nutrients from lake water. However, we were running at a pilot scale, but we did our lessons learned. We can prove the concept that it actually does work. And in the process of that, we found a company out of Montana called Clear as Water Recovery. In extensive discussions with them, and they've actually processed our lake water. They can take what we were doing as a pilot program and turn it into industrial scale. We're talking, I was doing 20 gallons a minute, they can do 1,000 gallons a minute. Will it solve all of our problems? No. This is going to take multiple faucets to solve lake water quality issues. However, their 98% efficiency rate on removing phosphates from the lake water and returning the lake water back cleaner will make a huge impact on long-term water clarity. Years like this will definitely be setbacks because the nutrients that came in, but there again, this is just one part of the tools in the toolbox. If we do a different treatment to the lake water and use this for maintenance, that is one option, and there's other things that we're looking at as well. I want to push this one forward because it's kind of the first step. As I don't know if you guys been getting phone calls on the lake this year, about every day. So it's important to, in my mind, to show the public that we are actually trying to do something. And by finding out if this is viable or not, it would be a huge step.
And I do support doing a project like this. For me, it was a timing issue that I didn't put in my recommended budget, but it's not that big of a deal. 50,000 more would bring the unreserved fund balance to 110,000, which is 1% of the fund. So it's not significant. So let's just assume that's added. And unless the council wants to, they'll need a motion to add that. Okay.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Albertson. Is there any discussion? Councilman Lallam?
Roger, will this be done this year then? That for sure will be done?
It'll be done the engineering study will be done in 2020.
Okay.
Councilman Vilhauer?
I don't recall, was this a recommendation also as part of the Lake Compesco, the master plan that's, going to be rolled out?
It is a faucet of that, yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Oh, and I should, for the record, make note that Michael Hoyer is no longer on the phone, so he won't be voting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to E911, I think is next. Moving right along here. This is not a giant budget. It's pretty steady here. The significant changes are pretty minor, but in regards to the size of the fund, 25,000 last year and this year, just transfers in from the general fund. E911 doesn't support itself. For the personnel request, you can see that's growing over time. There weren't any significant changes last year, and in this budget, again, the changes are due to the projected increase due to the wage study that we're currently working on and the budgeted health insurance premiums, same as the others. So the operating, there were no significant changes for the 2019, none for the 2020. And the capital outlay did decrease mainly because everyone was asked to freeze, and the proposed purchases were pretty minor. They're in the weeds, but $9,000 for software and $2,000 for office chairs. So all in all, the total revenues for the E911 budget are projected to be $958,000, which is an increase of 2.7%, and the total expenditures just slightly over $1 million, which is a 3% increase, and it leaves a deficit of $44,000. So, are there any questions? Yes, Councilman Roby.
The other counties that utilize our 911 services, they pay into that. They pay for those services.
Correct.
Okay. Is their contribution going, our expenses keep going up, is their contributions keeping up with that?
I would say not, but I will let Officer Toomey answer that one.
No. Short answer, no. It has been talked about. County money is always, they only get a certain amount for the 911 money, and we get 100% of that. So, good.
Do we get 100% of Cottington counties by now?
Yes.
We do, okay.
Yep.
Because that was an issue here a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Tim, is there anybody else that wants to be in, or are we saturated now?
No, we're not saturated. We're constantly looking for other REAM partners. We're also looking to expand it beyond just a 911 service to handle all calls. We just haven't landed any of those, but we are exploring those possibilities.
Any other counties that we would be able to take in?
Yep, we're definitely talking about some other counties, and the conversation is there. We don't have anything set in stone.
I just have to ask, when the other counties get funding for this, it comes from the state, okay, and they give 100% of that to us. But as our costs keep going up, would it be fair for us to bill them further?
Sure, it comes down to how much it is per call. So you have to balance, is it 85 cents per 911 call? So yes, I guess your answer is it would be fair. It's just not there's no agreement as of now.
Other questions? All right, thank you. So if there are no changes, we'll just continue moving on. The next fund is the Library Fines Fund. Library Fines Fund is dropping, and there were no significant changes in this year's budget. Last year there was a decrease, which really wasn't significant either. The operating costs were frozen, and that's why we see a decrease here. This is a pretty small fund, and it's doesn't generate a lot of revenue. It's a backup for extra things that the library needs, and we've been trying to. I should have Dee Dee come talk about the library fines. Why these are decreasing and what the philosophy is. And I know she can do a better job of that than I could.
I hope so. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'd be happy to talk about the Library Fines Fund. It is established in state law to collect gifts and then fines and other fees that the library collects. And then how it's been managed in the past is pretty reasonable, I would say. You're trying to balance your expenditures and your revenues. But we had some old technology we needed to replace. And so in 2019, we actually requested a relatively substantial amount more than we usually had in order to meet those needs, as well as we were also trying to help out with the cuts that were made in the CIP budget. We had requested approximately $100,000, and we got cut down to $50,000 last year. And so, if you all remember, I went back to the library board to request an additional amount of money from the fines fund to supplement that $50,000. And they did approve that, and you all did as well, and that ended up with $75,000 for our book budget for this year in 2019. When we've had the freezes this year, I had anticipated trying to do something similar. And in terms of the $75,000, Mayor Karen and Kristen, we had a good conversation about our budget we were all concerned about another year of high spending on the fines fund. And so when the proposal came in, I think that $25,000 was cut from that. But that was approved by the board, and that was something that I needed to inform you all about. And if you're looking at the fines fund requests, so I just got to get to my right page here. So I think it's on 128 of the board book, and I don't know if it just needs to be corrected to reflect that in my request for 20, we did request $25,000 for that, and the library board did approve that. And right now it's not reflecting that. So that's probably something I just overlooked when I was looking through everything. And I would also like to request that you all consider adding that $25,000 in so we can get back to $75,000, which is a decrease from where we were going. If you're looking at the long-term plan, which I believe is coming up, the request is I think $103,000 for 2021, and then it's going to continue with some growth So I hope we can see funding return to those levels. Yes, Bruce?
Hi, Dee Dee. The majority of that, what you're talking about is books, book purchases, is that correct?
It's all print materials. I should clarify that. So it does include books, but also audiobooks on CD, and then DVDs and music CDs as well.
And were we at like 87,000, somewhere in that neck of the woods in 17? 18, I should say, 18.
I
But-
think
and-
so. Oh, yeah,
And your
90,
request
97?
last year, you were looking for about 100,000?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And you're asking for an additional supplement besides the fines fund for another maybe $25,000 to kind of get you, I guess that'd get you to that $75,000, is that right?
Yes, the 75 for this year, it was still a 25% reduction from what we were hoping for, and there are some things that we have to do. We just can't purchase as much with that amount. I don't mean to state the obvious, but it's something like it may be the difference between 1,500 and 2,000 books purchased versus, say, over 5,000 books purchased. So yes. I would like to see that $25,000 utilized so we can get at least back to the $75,000 mark. And then in future years, should, the budget be friendlier, then hopefully we can get back to that $100,000 range for our print materials.
I would say that I really don't like depleting the library fines fund, which is not a big fund. I would like to have it be like an unmet request in the general fund. And one of those things that we would add to, but it didn't come out in the budget book as a request in the general fund and I don't know why, but who had a question? Glenn?
Refresh my memory, is there some, what was it something that we placed upon it or your library board? So as far as restriction on the how far you can deplete the fund balance? There's something that I remember asking that question 3 years ago.
It's actually a cap, not is there a cap on the revenue? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there's a cap of 35% of the general fund for the library, so. And
Okay.
we've been roughly $1 million, so it'd be something like 350,000-ish, and we're about 250 right
Okay,
now.
that must be what I had in my mind then, okay, thank you.
So, excuse me, Mayor, are you suggesting then that we not use fines fund money, that we would propose additional
I
funds?
just want to be careful. I would do both. I mean, if she's wanting her request to be shown as a request in the library fines fund, I think we should clarify that for the record, that didn't come out for whatever reason. That was her request. The library board recommended it, but they didn't recommend anything out of the general fund as above the freezing point.
I think they definitely would have, but my understanding was the freeze rather than, that was probably a misunderstanding on my part. That I think they definitely would have, even for the 50, if we're looking for an unmet need for $50,000 to meet our commitment in the long-range plan.
So, Dee Dee, if we added $25,000 and we did allow the fines fund to be applied to your budget, that would be sufficient at this point, in your opinion?
I believe so. It's something we definitely have to work with, but it'd be much better than only the 50,000. That would be that'd be
'Cause
dire,
you got
is the word I'm gonna use.
the bare essentials last year, I think, so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, last year was really cut
was-
too.
yeah.
And I didn't want to be the one making the cut, so I did ask all of the departments to freeze and show me how. And then they have the ability to shift things around, do away with stuff to make it balance. But then to come back with requests if we find additional funding, and I think that might be what happened with Roger's request too, that I didn't communicate that clearly to everyone. So I did, some of the departments caught that, and this one didn't, so we would need a motion to amend this. Yes.
I would make that motion.
Wait, Kristen wanted to
that's
say
fine.
something.
No. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, with the library board approving this, it's appropriate to follow it. I think during the conversations of the budget meetings that the mayor and I had, I think what we're seeing with the library fines fund, and I think that's just our cautionary little bit of a flag, is the fines revenue is definitely decreasing. So if, once this fund, eventually, if it does run out, we know that some of those things that it was paying for are going to be placed back on the general fund. So it's not that it can't happen and it shouldn't happen, it's just to know that probably continuing to sustain it this way, we're gonna have to kind of watch it. I think Dee Dee too can speak to the fact that the revenue's going down based off of a little bit that people aren't renting as many books that way, but the ebooks are increasing. So it's just to kind of put that out there, because anytime the items are being purchased out of this one and the money runs out, we know it's coming back to the general fund. So when their computers and items like that need to be purchased, it'll come back to the general fund. So,
And part of the reason the library finds revenue is decreasing is people like me who, when I would check out a hardcover book, I would almost never return it on time. There'd always be a fine. And now I don't do that. I have ebooks and they just disappear, whether you're done reading them or not. And there's no fine.
And there are no fines, yes.
I do too.
Then you gotta go on the
Yes.
hold list.
Councilman Albertson, yes.
Is added to the budget and will be taken from the fines fund.
I would second that motion.
We have a motion by Albertson and a second by Bueller to add 25,000 back into the library fines budget for books. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Thank you. May I make one more comment?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the gentleman here from Utilities earlier.
Steve Lehner.
Steve, sorry, Steve, for me forgetting your name. I just wanted to make a comment. One of his final comments was that when you have to choose between paying your bills and paying your utilities and buying food, what are you going to choose? And that a lot of those people don't use the wellness center, and a lot of those people don't use other the Parks and Rec programs. They do use the library. So I just wanted to say that there are city services that are being utilized by utilities customers, even if they're the, the people who are struggling most. They're definitely using the library.
That's true, and it's a fantastic place. If you haven't been there lately, it's a great place to go. We have a fantastic library, and it's a comfortable, fun place to hang out, and so much stuff there. You could never get bored.
So come and see us.
Yeah.
Get your library cards.
Thanks, Dee Dee.
We can fix it.
All righty. So here we go with this will be a deficit of 30,000 then. So there were capital outlay requests not met, computers in that fund. So the next fund is the urban renewal fund, and there's nothing going on. So no expenditures. Right now, no significant changes last year, no significant changes in the budget this year, although the council will be considering, as they do every year, the urban renewal tax implementation or not. So that will be coming soon. The Sioux River Watershed Project Fund is next, and we'll start out with the revenues. Last year, there was a grant increase of 62,000, and this year there's a decrease of 58,000. So it's kind of hovering, and the changes in the personnel obviously are due to the wage study and insurance. And I will note, I mentioned earlier there was one reduction in force, and it was from this department that there was an employee, a part-time employee, that resigned and we didn't fill that position. Mostly the budget is decreased, and it's, one employee can probably handle the work without the extra help. Changes in the operating were all pretty insignificant last year and this year, but since the budget isn't huge, the small changes do come out to be pretty significant in terms of the budget. So $57,000 budget decrease ends up being almost a third of the budget. So that is significant. And in summary, we're projecting revenues of $229,000, expenditures of $207,000. So it's almost a wash, but in the positive direction. So, are there any questions about this? All right, we'll keep moving. The next one is the TIF funds. Now, there's not really a whole lot you can do about the tax increment funds, but we do need, they're part of the budget, so I'll mention what they are. Tax increment financing is an economic development tool that we have. And when you take land and develop it, you increase its value. The tax goes up on it because the property tax is based upon the value of the land and the improvements to the land. So if you improve it, you get an increment of tax. So if you don't improve it, you don't get that benefit. And one thing we can do legally, and cities in our state do a lot of this, is to use that increment that increases to give back to the developer as an incentive to develop, because then it just kind of evens the playing field. Nobody's losing out because we wouldn't have had that revenue if they hadn't developed. So it ends after 20 years and we're back to normal. But that's what tax increment financing is in a nutshell. We have 4 funds that are currently going along, and there's pink, or the purplish color there, is expenditure. The blue color is revenue. So tax increment financing district number 1 is the Hanton Industrial Park, which is where Dakota Bodies and Glacial Lakes Energy in that area. That one's doing well. Not that we could do anything about it if it isn't. Tax increment financing district number 2 is Mallard Point, which isn't doing as well. See, the expenditures are greater. Nothing you can do about it, but just understand it. TIF number 5, and incidentally, 3 was paid off, 4 never existed. We don't know why. We just skipped that number for some reason. Maybe it was Stanton's unlucky number. He was kind of superstitious about stuff. Anyway, we don't have a TIF 4. And TIF 5 is the First Avenue North extension, or Willow Creek Drive. That one's a bad one. Mostly expenses. There hasn't been much development out there, and it was just bad timing. We did that TIF district right before the recession, and then nothing developed. So we're starting to see some development, so maybe things will turn around. Tax increment financing district number 6 is Pheasant Ridge, and that one has done very well. So you see the revenues are exceeding the expenditures, so that's a really good one. We like them to look like that. We do have a TIF number 7. It's not in here because it's not producing yet, right?
Start until, I think TIF 7, I think will not be final construction till 2020, and then it wouldn't have tax till 2021.
Okay.
So
we'll see that in a couple years. So, any questions? Oops, I'll go back.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just to note, we will have TIFs 8, 9, and 10 on next Monday's agenda.
Yeah. No,
No.
we're not skipping numbers. We're trying to use our tools. You know, we have them. You got to use them. Any other questions or comments? General obligation bonds. Oh, sorry, Adam.
When do these TIFs end? Do we have ending dates on these?
Off the top of my head, I don't know all the dates because they're kind of, but they're quite a ways out still. I think like 20, yeah, I think it's like 2030 is when, does that sound about right? Because I think they were
Yep.
9, one was in 2000. So I can get that for you, but they're kind of all over. But it's a while.
Okay.
They have a while to
So
still.
they still have, like the ones
There's
that aren't?
potential that they could.
Yeah, they can turn around.
They could.
Okay, that's more what I was concerned about.
Yeah, we can hope. Alrighty. General obligation bonds. You also don't really have any power to do anything, but here you go. The Kristen budgets whatever she has to, and I just go, okay. You want to explain how you get these numbers?
So when we took on the general obligation bonds, there is a resolution that states that I have to take a certain percentage of whatever the annual payment is, and that is what I do. So whatever the debt service is for that year, I take the increase that is necessary, and then I put that into the revenue, cover the expenditure, and when you see the budget ordinance that is approved, you'll see two numbers at the bottom of that ordinance. One is our property tax, and the other one is this GO bond property tax number, and that's what is certified to the county, and that is what is charged then to property tax owners.
Councilman Billhauer?
2023, is that our last year on those?
I think it's 2024, but
Okay.
it's close. I think it's 2024 though.
And this was this for the event center?
This is the event center. Yep.
So, and again, this is on the property taxes. Any questions or comments? All right, the next fund is the Capital Projects Fund. And as you'll recall, this is the fund that was set up when we bonded for the Wellness Center, the softball complex, and the ice arena. And we are maintaining a balance in that fund, but we're not spending any money out of there because we don't have a plan right now for the ice arena, but that could turn around. The money is available for that purpose. Any questions or comments about that? All right. Next, we have the wastewater fund. The wastewater is an enterprise fund, and the revenues are almost exactly flat. Just a very, very slight increase. No significant changes last year, no significant changes for 2020. Personnel, no significant changes last year, and the changes for 2020 are due to the wage study and budgeted health insurance premiums. In the operating budget, last year we did some relatively minor changes, and this year, again, they're relatively minor operating changes. So a little bit of an increase in consultant services, an increase in sludge application, and foam polymer increase for not just 30,000, but 30,100. The capital outlay is a little bit different. We have a little bit, you can see a pretty significant change because we're doing a pretty big project right now. So last year we were doing design, and we budgeted for the administration building design, and I better have Mike come up here and help me with this. He's been waiting all night for this chance. But are we expecting to do some construction this year yet in 2019 on that admin building?
No, right now we're at 99% design, and so we want to move forward with an application for some funding here before
Okay.
October 1st. The interest rates on these projects are going to go up after the October 1st deadline. Right now, our interest rate on a 20-year loan to help fund this project is about 2.5%. so it's really cheap. But they're going to go up 1/4 to 0.5% after the October deadline in the subsequent quarter. So we want to move forward with a funding application and just move forward with that project.
Yes, and you can see in the budget for next year, the building construction, $5 million is in the budget, along with some pretty big equipment too. So we do an annual sanitary replacement and rehab project, and it's budgeted $325,000. A new truck, rate study. How often do you do those rate studies, Mike?
It's been a long time. The last technical sewer rate study was completed in March of 2004. And then in 2011, then we bumped our sewer fees to adjust for the debt service on the Headworks project. And so that's the last time our rates have been adjusted, but they have not been evaluated by technically since 2004. So we have budgeted for this rate evaluation for wastewater and a second one also in solid waste. And here we got the quotes for those evaluations from 3 or 4 engineering firms that do that kind of work. And they tell us if we combine the 2 rate evaluations for wastewater and solid waste into one and minimize site visits, we can save 10 to 20% on those costs, because the 2 budgets together is $107,000, and we might be down about $86,000 to $95,000 for those 2 evaluations.
Good job, Mike. Okay, I like that. I'm glad we're doing a rate study. It's about time. And primary clarifier number 2, assessment and design engineering, $250,000. So that's kind of a big deal there.
Yep.
The summary, revenues increased just 0.8%, so very little increase. Expenditures went way up, so we're in the hole quite a bit. So we're getting a loan, and because we are a municipality, we're eligible for these loans at a super duper interest rate that regular people don't get. And we'll take advantage of that. That's a benefit to our community. So there's still pretty significant decline in the cash balance.
I would point out that we retired SRF loan number 3 in October 2016, and that loan was for $2.6 million at 5.25%, and it had an annual debt service of $210,000 on it. And at this point, with those rates being at 2.5%, a $3 million funding package would have about $19,000 per year less debt service at $191,000. And what we'll do is we'll determine how much cash reserves we use and how much debt service we take out once we get bids. We hope to bid this project before Christmas, so that if we get favorable bids, we could move forward then and award something in January. And so we'll be back before you in October with an application by October 1st, and we'll be here in September, I guess, to proceed with funding this project.
Great. This is a very well-run department, if you can't tell. I'll just point that out. Thank you, Mike, for your excellent work on this. And so we're in good hands, and things will be fine. Any questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
One comment. Just to confirm, I didn't see it in here, but we also had anticipated doing a sanitary sewer system model or capacity study. I believe Kristen had it in there, but I didn't see the number.
Yeah, it's in the sewer collection for $40,000, and that's sort of a budget place marker because we haven't developed a scope of work for that yet.
Yeah.
But our last infiltration and inflow study cost about $40,000 back in '06. So I put in $40,000 as a budget marker because what we want to do is evaluate the main corridors through the community and prepare to upsize sewers where we're seeing the growth residentially or by industrial discharges.
We really need that. That'll be helpful to us.
And that was, we don't have a scope of work, so that was a kind of a place marker. I think it might be a little bit more than that, depends on how the scope develops.
I'm just wondering where that is. You say that's in the budget?
Sewer collection, 43252. Right there.
Oh, I see it. Got it. On page 163, for those of you who are following along in your book. All right, any questions? All right, we'll move right on to solid waste, and you just stay put.
Yep.
So solid waste revenues are pretty flat too. I'm a little bit, 6.9%. I guess that's not flat. We have no significant changes from the 2019 budget, but the 2020 budget had a tipping fee increase for both individuals and commercial. So that accounts for the growth. Personnel is growing like all the other departments, projected increase to implement the wage study and health insurance premiums. Oops, not that one. And then no significant changes this year on the operating budget. This is a revenue generating fund, and maybe theoretically being a breadwinner wouldn't have to tighten its belt like everybody else, but they did. So thank you for commiserating with the non-revenue generating departments. 2.6% increase in operating budget. Then the capital outlay, you see some individually relatively minor things in 2019 except for refuse truck, $383,000. For 2020, some more just relatively minor things except for the compactor, and then that's a pretty big piece of equipment, $651,000. And then the rate study is in there, and that's what we'd be partnering with, have the same consultant do both solid waste and sanitary sewer rates. So as Mike just mentioned before, so the main increase here is that compactor.
Yes.
And you probably had been, well, there's reserves.
Yeah, that we did award that back in March of this year. You have to buy them in advance to get them to be delivered on time. So yeah, that's $651,000, and that's $651. That's the net expenditure, because the gross expenditure is $753,000, and then we get $103,000 back from the repurchase or selling our existing compactor back to that vendor. So we'll get back $103,000 in revenue from the existing compactor. And that has been awarded, was awarded March 4th, 2019, so it'll be delivered early in January 2020.
Okay, so this, in summary, revenues were slightly less than expenditures, resulting in a deficit of $162,000. Are there any questions about this? Any comments you want to make about the solid waste fund? Another easy one. Thank you, Mike. Good job. Man, is this the last one, Kristen? Oh my gosh. Airport fund. Airport fund is our last fund. So we are almost to the end of the budget book. And look, here we are, page 187. In 2019, the significant changes were a decrease in transfer from the general fund and an increase in transfer from the capital improvement fund. We're always moving these things around. There isn't much change at all, but we are adding charges that are significant. So that allows us to do a little bit of a decrease in the transfer from the capital improvement fund, and we're increasing the transfer in from the general fund. Right now, the airport doesn't sustain itself with its revenue, but I think we'll get there someday, looking at the growth of our airport and the positive things that are happening there, and the addition of the wonderful airline service from SkyWest doing business as United is really helping. And Todd, you should come up here. I think he's back there. I know. The airport personnel, last year for the 2019 budget, we did add a foreman, and this year we're not projecting any personnel additions in the recommended budget. There is an increase due to the wage study results and health insurance. So no significant changes in the operating budget. And the capital outlay is down just a little bit. Major things to note in the budget, the terminal apron reconstruction for $1.4 million, and then we're doing some minor things. Did you want to add to that, Todd?
No, you're doing great.
All right. I feel better having Todd sit right next to me. So, okay. So the total revenues and the expenses balanced out so close that it's a wash. But there was an unmet personnel request in the budget for an airport maintenance worker, and also an unmet capital outlay request for a skid steer. So these are things to.
I think it's supposed to be an admin position.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. I didn't catch that, I'm sorry. Instead of a maintenance worker, it's supposed to be the admin.
Oh,
Administrative assistant.
okay. That, and it's an unmet need, but I mean, if we do increase revenues, you know, this is something we could consider a transfer for. Again, I think that they're shorthanded at the airport. We're running on empty half the time, and if somebody gets sick, it's a sketchy situation. So there's not a lot of personnel that keep that airport running. How many do you have total?
4 maintenance positions and a foreman.
And you?
Yep.
So 6 people, and the traffic is increasing there, and get some exciting things happening in the future. So I can see that need is only going to increase. So, Kristen.
Mayor, Todd, what's the skid steer for? Is that for snow removal?
In between the parking lot, excuse me, the cars in between the parking lot, and then the sidewalks and stuff. We have a loader right now. It's just way too big to get in there. So we try and do it with a snow blower, and you should have came out this spring. It was ridiculous.
Blowing my own snow.
We had about a 12-foot drift in front of the terminal that we did mostly by hand.
Oh,
So,
oh my gosh.
skid steer be nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
In that case,
All right. Are there any other questions? Councilman Bueller?
I would say, Todd, maybe you could expound on the need or the necessity for that additional person.
the administrative assistant, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. It was supposed to be an administrative assistant position. We are pretty well on track for staff right now for maintenance. As I've said in the years prior, I want to make sure, 110% sure, that when we add staff, we absolutely need staff. So right now for maintenance, we are adequate. As the mayor stated, though, we don't have anybody to cover vacation or sick time. So that's myself and my foreman. We try and keep the overtime to the minimum of the 10,000 we have in the budget, but we've blown through that this year, obviously. But the administrative assistant would take care of a ton of paperwork that I can't get to if I'm covering other duties. Answering the phones is a big deal. Since we've grown, I mean, I guess it'll take you back 6 years, we were looking to lose air service when we had Great Lakes, and a lot of you remember that. Since we've grown from 6 years ago, if we take the July's numbers of enplanements, we're over 20,000 enplanements next year. That's 40,000 total passengers in and out of the Watertown terminal in just the 6 years. That's huge growth. So my job has gotten a lot more busy over the years. A lot of more paperwork, phone calls coming in, meetings, and other such stuff that us managers do on a day-to-day basis with running staff. The foreman position was a great addition to remove myself a little bit from my staff on the day-to-day duties. But the FAA is only making our lives tougher. I'll put it that way with paperwork. So.
Well, and I would add too, I mean, there's going to be distraction for you too, I think, more in the upcoming year or two for the developing the new terminal as we move forward, or we've got all the rental stuff now that's expanded. I mean, there's just a lot of growth outside of just, passengers using you know, if we get into, more flights coming in and out, the FBO, they're busier. I mean, this keeps piling up.
And to
And I
grow,
think we need to really take this into consideration here.
You also
soon.
need to consider that we've just reorganized, and the airport department is now part of the Public Works Department, which has administrative help. And so these smaller departments, like Upper Big Sioux, it's the same thing. We did reduce the force and took away an administrative assistant from the Upper Big Sioux, but now that position is part of the Public Works Department, which has administrative staff.
The only thing I would say to that, Mayor, is that that's not gonna help him when he's gotta do overtime on vacations.
No.
Weekends.
An
Okay.
administrative.
Maybe I misunderstood.
He was saying he was requesting an administrative, not a maintenance help. And I'm seeing growth in the maintenance help. I definitely would see that, not so much the administrative. Because, I mean, that's part of the benefit of being part of a department, is that you can share those administrative duties across the department, like it used to be. And, I mean, we've been there before, and we're back again, and those services are there for everyone in the department. So that will be a benefit to the airport department. Yeah. So I could see, you know, if we see what happens as the year goes on and the traffic increases. I mean, Todd was saying that he didn't want that to be a maintenance worker. He wanted that to be an administrative worker. He might change his mind. That's what.
we had to choose, I guess is where I was going with that. If it was a maintenance worker or an admin, I did get staff for maintenance, so where we're lacking the most right now. Without the fact that we can't cover vacation or sick without myself or my foreman doing that. That's where I was going with that. I want to make sure 110% that we need to add staff. I've been going after an admin for 2 years now. So that's where I'm at with that.
Heath, did you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add to that comment. I've already began conversations with how to amend and mold some of the current staff's duties as a public works department that would fit right in line with what we're discussing right now. And I would obviously only a week into it, and that week that I've had off on vacation, I haven't had an opportune time to get together with many of the divisional managers yet at this point. But these are the exact discussions I hope to continue with each one of them and connect the dots where needed and support any new request as needed, and work collaboratively and make sure that we're getting full use out of all the current staff before we would bring forth any additional staff requests. But I think there are some efficiencies to be gained between some of these divisions, maybe not all, but some definitely.
For sure. And I mean, my gut feeling is I'd rather add a maintenance worker, because if you add an administrative assistant, that person is not going to be able to fill in when there are different duties. And so, did you have something, Kristen?
I just wanted to point one thing out as we're discussing any type of probably position or large increase to the airport fund. At the current way that the airport fund sits, it wouldn't be able to probably take it on its own. So any decision that you as a council would make to increase it, whether it be personnel or a large potential equipment purchase, it would have to be also an increase from the general fund as a transfer. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that you're aware of the correlation between that. So at this time, the airport fund would need help then from the general fund if that decision is made. Another thing that isn't super clear in the 2020 budget, just because we've talked about it a lot and it's definitely been discussed at the council, but with the way it's working with the terminal, there's a potential chance that the 2020 budget as it looks now may change. And with that, there is the potential that we are going to have to determine a way to find a little bit of extra money. So I just wanted the council to also keep that in mind when it comes to the big project that's coming up.
I'll expand on that a little bit. We've had great talks with the FAA. I have a meeting with them tomorrow. Excuse me. And they need to make their mind up on how they want to go with the terminal project and what year they want to put it in that fits in best with their funding mechanisms. So stay tuned. We did get good word the other day. We'll hope it stays that way. But we've been discussing in-house that something we can't bring public right now because we don't know which way they're leaning. But we hope to find out soon.
All right. Questions? Councilman Albertson.
Todd, I was just wondering, is there any department in the city that uses a skid steer in the summer, spring, summer, fall, that would not need it during the winter, that you could use it? You know, I know that maybe they still use it to clean streets or something, I don't know, but I just wondered if there's one sitting someplace that is used 9 months but wouldn't be used 3.
Even if it's used in the winter, maybe when it's not being used.
Yeah.
Have you tried to borrow?
Yes. And Rob said he'd just take over for us.
Well, I know they have one at the golf course that it's used to clean the
Oh, there you go.
bike trail and the parking lot and.
I've spoke to a few departments. I haven't made it all the way around the loop.
Okay. I just thought that might be a possibility if that.
Great
it makes
suggestion.
Better than shoveling.
Right. Absolutely.
I heard that next year our snow is all going to fall with 2-day increments in between so that we can go here and there and get all the snow removed before the next storm.
Todd, on that 80,000, does that include attachments?
It does.
A snow blower and bucket?
Yeah, and that's actually we got better proposals than the budgeted number. We got our proposals after the budgeted number, so it actually came in quite a bit cheaper than that. So we don't need as big of a machine. We went off of what Rob has, and we don't need that big of a machine, and so the prices came in a lot cheaper. But this adds a broom, so we can use it in the summertime to go around the runway lights and taxiway lights. It includes a bucket and a snow blower.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Todd. Anybody want to propose any changes or anything? If not, I think we're done. Okay, there's somebody behind me saying they got something.
Yeah,
Came this close.
I just want to make sure that I was clear about the E911, so I apologize. But when you asked if it was fair to the other counties, I just want everybody to know that they only have 911 services. They don't have like dispatch calls, business calls and all those things. So all the counties add up to or less than half of what the calls Connington County gets. So we get about 11,800 911 calls. And that revenue from the surcharges is about $350,000. All the other counties add up to about $283,000. So we get 100% of their surcharges. So it is fair based on the number of calls we get from them. So, but to your point, we are looking in our 2021 strategic plan. We're looking at expanding that to handling the business day-to-day calls. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to go back on the wage study a little bit, just to summarize that. We expect that the wages will increase across all departments about $722,000 with the wage study implemented. Now, if we don't implement the wage study, we still will be increasing wages because we have signed contracts with the unions. So the difference between the contracts, the increase that we're going to do anyway, and the wage study across all departments is $434,367. Okay, so the part of that which would be in the general fund, which is the only fund that's really hurting that badly, is about $260,000. So if you're contemplating just not honoring the wage study and letting people be paid lower than a fair wage just to make our budget balance a little bit better, I would urge you not to take that temptation and find a different way. Our employees deserve a fair wage, and I think they deserve it the moment we understand what it is, and not a year later and not 2 years later, but right away. And I sincerely hope that you'll consider that very carefully. The wages have been unfairly low for a long time for the city employees, and I hope we can really meet it right away. And of course, we're guessing what it is, so if we're way off, we can revisit that. But I want you to keep that in mind moving forward. So with that, we've gone through all of our different funds. Does anybody have any questions? I personally really like doing it this way better, and you can let me know how you feel about it too. I mean, it's not even 8 yet. This is a record. It's and we ate. We took a long break, so thank you everyone for coming. So I'm going to come back up and finish the meeting out. Okay, so we're back on the agenda. The presentation is over. Since we finished tonight, we will not be having a meeting tomorrow night. So everyone's excused from that meeting, and hopefully the press won't show up. No need. And it did say on the announcement that only if necessary, if we run out of time, because we normally would run out of time to do this in one night. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? None. Are there any liaison member reports? None. I do not believe we have any reason to go into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2. So I will look for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Lallam, second by Holeen. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. We are adjourned.